Hi, everyone. It is exactly 10 a.m. Pacific time, so we're going to be kicking off. Thanks for joining us today for our last webinar in our 2019 webinar series, New Horizons, Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence in Market Research. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you've got to leave the webinar a little bit early, don't worry. We will be posting the recording online, and we'll be sending out an email afterwards as well with a link to it. We also have our webinars from our June and July sessions up online, so if for some reason you want to go back and watch those and catch up on some of the webinars that you may not have been able to see. I know summer's a heavy vacation schedule for a lot of folks. You can view all of our webinar recordings on our website. Before we dig in to the content today, I wanted to just say a few words of thanks to our webinar sponsors. First off, to Research for Good, who has been such an incredible sponsor multiple years now for our webinar series. So thanks so much to the team there for their support of the content that we're putting on today. And then also to Focus Vision. They have very generously donated their webinar platform, which is both a blessing and a curse for those of us like myself who work from home and had to actually get dressed for this webinar today because there's video. But thank you so much to the team at Focus Vision for providing their platform and their generous support and helping us run the webinar series this summer. I also want to give many thanks to our corporate donors. As I'm sure you know, if you've been involved with Women in Research for any period of time, we are a completely fee-free association. We don't charge for any of our programming and services, and that's because we get really generous support from corporate donors. So I want to just take a moment to acknowledge them. Facebook, which has provided an incredible level of support for us. Kantar, which has been a great partner for us for many years, as well as Confirm It, Dynata, Fieldwork, Focus Point Global, Fuel, Hypothesis, LinkedIn, P2 Sample, and Protege. Thank you so much for your support of WIRE. We would not be able to provide any of the programming services and events without that support. I also want to thank our media partners who help support our programming by promoting to our membership base all of our programming and services. We also get a lot of in-kind donations from these partners, everything from analytical support for some of the research surveys that we do to providing space or software or services to the organization. Many thanks to SMR. We've actually got a big event coming up at SMR Congress in a couple weeks that I'll talk about at the end of the webinar. To our friends at the Insights Association, Green Book, the MRS, Direction First, Insights Consulting. They also host all of our post-event surveys, so thank you to Direction First and Insights. To QRCA, AMSRO, MMRA, G3 Translate, Trinalytics. My friend Trina does all of our annual member survey analytics, and so she's been a great partner for us. So I want to just give a special shout out for her because she does a ton of data crunching for us every year. Microsoft generously gives us software support, AMSRS, Connect 365. MRMW, SampleCon, Corinium, and MRWeb for hosting our job board. So many thanks to all of our partners. I also just want to very quickly say, if this is your first time using Zoom, this is our webinar platform today. I want to just mention some best practices for reaching out during the webinar. We have both a Q&A and a chat option at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you use the chat option if you have technical difficulties. So if you can't hear us or there's some kind of issue, you would want to use that. And you would want to use the Q&A option for all content-related questions. So we will do Q&A about 15 minutes before the end of the session today. If you've got a question, you can post it there. And you can also post questions on Twitter. We've got a Twitter chat going on as well, and we'll be doing some post-webinar Twitter conversations as well. So I want to just kick off by introducing, obviously, our panelists today, and I'm going to start with Frank. So Frank Burns joining us today. Frank leads the Technology and Data Science Group at Dig Insights, which is a cross-disciplinary team of scientists and developers that's bridging the gap between buzzword and business solutions. Working with Dig's largest global clients, he's building analytics, machine learning, and automation solutions that live up to the hype for actionable insight. So welcome, Frank. Next up is Melinda Hahn-Williams. Melinda's the Chief Data Scientist at Distillery, where she leads a team of researchers, analysts, and engineers using observed behavioral data and AI to better understand and predict consumer behavior. Before joining the world of predictive marketing intelligence, Melinda worked as a physicist, developing third generation, oh my God, Melinda, I can't even say that word, photovoltaics?
Photovoltaics, yeah, solar cells.
Oh my God, I almost got it, photovoltaics. And studying electronic transport and nanostructured graphene devices. What this means is that Melinda's way smarter than pretty much everyone on this webinar today. Melinda earned her PhD in applied physics with distinction from Columbia University. So welcome, Melinda.
Thanks, Kristen.
Finally, we've got Connie Zhang. I really appreciate Connie joining us today. I literally just met her at an SMR event maybe a month or so ago, and she was giving a talk on AI, and I grabbed her even before her session and was like, you've got to come on this Wire webinar that we're running because we'd love to have your perspective. So Connie's a Senior Director for Insights and Analytics for Corporate Marketing at Abbott, where she's responsible for discovering insights and ensuring insights drive activations for corporate campaigns in key global markets. Connie's always curious and looking into ways to bring the latest thinking and technology to enhance the process during insights discovery. She's got over 15 years of experience in market research with global markets coverage, including Asia Pacific and LATAM regions. And prior to market research, she had years of experience in CPG brand marketing. So welcome, Connie. All right, Connie, I'm actually gonna kick things off with you. Obviously, this topic is really big right now. I know you were just speaking at a conference about a month ago on it, and I think there are a lot of folks in the research sphere that are really interested in the applications of machine learning. And hold on, I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen so you can see everyone's face. I think that there's a lot of folks that are interested in this whole idea of machine learning and automation, and I think there's a lot of nervousness around it too. I think a lot of folks think, oh gosh, machine learning automation is going to take my job. I'm not going to be able to work anymore. And so I'd kind of like to hear from each of you, but first starting from Connie, you know, how are you or your company currently integrating machine learning and AI into the work that you do? And Connie, we'll start with you.
There are a couple of things I want to talk about. You know, at Global Insights, we always strive for using the latest technology, or exploring and leveraging the latest technology and folding into insight discovery phase. Even a couple of years ago, we said we want to learn the best practice in AI or machine learning. As you mentioned, it's a big buzzword. Even 2 or 3 years ago, when you go to IIEX or ESMA, all they talk about is AI and machine learning, right? But in terms of application, it still really bring them to the real life use case. It can be challenging. What we have done so far in the past several years is one of the big platforms we have built is working with a partner to use AI or the AI platform to build, I wouldn't say called Insights Hub. It's really a repository, and it's more than a repository of all the research, insights, information across Abbott division. For people who know a little bit of Abbott, Abbott has a very diversified portfolio of different divisions, and they operate in a very entrepreneurship kind of manner. And so in the past, there were a lot of silos in terms of between divisions. The platform actually first enabled people share the information, and also now we're building the phase 2, really using a lot of machine learning capability to help not only collate the learnings across different divisions or researchers, and also trying to bring what's outside of the research, you know, link to what's available outside of the research sphere. So that's one big application for AI. The second, a few other projects we have done is a lot of social listening. Social ethnography, right? Looking for vendors with very strong expertise with a specific topic, trying to understand natural occurring conversations in the social space for specific topics. And part of that is, it's really a lot of natural language processing, machine learning, trying to dwindle down from the bigger topics like funnel process to the smaller, much more focused topics. So that has been done quite a few times, and the learning is very, very eye-opening. At the same time, I know we're going to talk about this later on, because a lot of when you do machine learning or the search words, the technical term we use is nuance, right? The filters. It's always based on your current knowledge. So the human input, when you start this type of AI or machine learning project, is extremely critical, because you could start from the wrong foot. But at the same time, the beauty with machine learning is also it's iterative, and you always have a chance to go back, because the information is still there. It's just how you collate, how you use different field, understanding your competitive landscape and macro context. You have a chance to reiterate and also to get to a better place.
Yeah. Thanks, Connie. That's super helpful. Hey, Melinda, I'd like to pivot to you, and I think it might be helpful too for you maybe just to give like a little 30-second overview of what Distillery actually does, because you're not a traditional research firm.
Yeah, that's right. We're not. It's interesting when you say how's your company using machine learning these days, because we sort of come from a different direction. Machine learning and AI have always been at the core of what we do.
Right.
Primarily an audience solutions company for online targeted advertising. So what we're doing with machine learning is we're using it to understand and predict people's behavior, and then we use the machine learning. That's what lets us convert a raw stream of observed behavioral data points across thousands of people, and take all those points and convert them into an intelligible set of characteristics and behaviors that we can use both to understand consumers or to reach them through targeted advertising.
Yeah, super interesting. And I know that you guys have been working with a couple of different research firms to figure out how to layer those behavioral insights on top of traditional research data, which I think is new for a lot of us. Yeah.
Yeah, we do sort of come at this from the other side, where we were using the machine learning for a different purpose, and then over time we realized, hey, as we use machine learning in order to target the best people, we almost get as a byproduct all of this super rich insight about who those people are. And so we sort of were able to package that up into something that's more consumable, that also, then ties directly to activating.
Well, and you guys kind of just went through a business pivot, didn't you? Because you kind of started out as one kind of company, and now you kind of pivoted toward more of the data science space.
Exactly. Yeah, we were more of a DSP before, and now we are. We officially are no longer a DSP, and we're an audience solutions company. So we provide audiences. They're available on anyone's DSP. We don't care who. And as part of that, we're really sort of doubling down on our identity as an applied data science company and a data company. And so I think it sort of fits right into like really use machine learning to understand people and to reach them.
Yeah. And Frank, I'd love to hear your perspective, because you're coming from more, I think, of a traditional, like more consulting insights kind of perspective than some of the other folks on the webinar today.
Yeah, and so, from that perspective, well, I mean, we do, but we also, we kind of play two roles. So we do certainly, work with clients in a traditional market research sense, and we're starting to work with those clients in the machine learning space as well and develop custom solutions for them. But we also develop our own products and our SaaS products internally, as well as just internal kind of process tools for ourselves. So we kind of have machine learning all across the board there. But kind of the more traditional stuff, our data science team will develop stuff to streamline the process of the traditional research process. So that can be, open-ended coding, sentiment analysis, image recognition, social listening, that kind of stuff, where, we're not changing the game of how, market research projects run, but we're trying to, insert some tools in there that allow the research teams to, elevate what they're doing and expand what they're doing. All the way up to, things like consumer segmentation. Market researchers are in market research, I would say machine learning for us has had a big impact there. We've been able to use a lot of different kinds of data in our segmentations. We've been able to increase our accuracy. We've been able to kind of deploy these segmentations across our customers' databases now. So as before, when segmentation and market research was something that was kind of in a silo and it existed with just that team, we've been able to take that and kind of disseminate it across the organization and ingrain that kind of process everywhere rather than just living in that silo. So there are applications like that as well that machine learning has been quite powerful for us and made an impact there.
Yeah. So you kind of answered my second question, which is, both you and Melinda just got honored on I think it was the Grit Future List for basically the most innovative, forward-thinking minds in the industry. So congratulations on that. And I think a lot of that list is based around, your ability to use new technologies like this to create more innovative research techniques. I know that you just talked a little bit about how Dig is using AI and machine learning, but it'd be interesting if both you and Melinda can just share a little bit about where you see the industry headed overall. I mean, you did talk about how Dig's using the applications now, but do you see folks in the industry really moving toward using these types of solutions, or is it still pretty slow going?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing people use these types of solutions, but yeah, it is a little bit slow going. And I think there's this, certainly the popular opinion is AI is everywhere. Like Connie said, AI is, we should be scared and nervous. And I think anyone in the know is like any of the data scientists, they don't share that fear. Partly because, in the world of robots, you still need robot repairmen, but also, this technology is not, all that it's cracked up to be in a lot of instances. But certainly there is cutting edge stuff going on. I think in the future, what we're going to see in market research specifically will be the ability to ask less questions and to get to your insights. I think that's going to be advances in big data along with AI and all that stuff. We're starting to marry together all the different kinds of data that we have on people and be able to look at that all together in meaningful ways and model with that. And that's Melinda. I think that's a lot of what she's doing now is taking all that data and aggregating it together. And there's a lot of cool work happening there where we can start to predict things with modeling without going out and saying, okay, I have to design a survey, I have to do this, and going out and asking specific questions. Even us, even in our Upside like idea screen application, we started to take all the past data that we had from years and years of doing this and just create neural nets out of it. And we realized that we could predict a product success and optimize a design of a product without fielding a single question or going to, a respondent at all. And so, I know a lot of other people are doing work like that as well. And I think that's where things are headed. And, at least the coolest place that things are headed, just the ability to, predict things and ask less questions and really rethink about surveys and how we design market research.
Yeah. Melinda, I think Distillery has like a great example that I saw at some point, the donut shop example of like using, primary research data coupled with behavioral data and the different types of insights that you can get from both of them. But I know it's also been a little slow going to convince traditional researchers about the value and the power of that behavioral data that you're collecting. You want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I think I like Frank's point that I think it's going to let us ask more questions. Like one of the cool things about machine learning, particularly when using unsupervised techniques, is you can get answers to questions that you didn't know you had in the first place. And I do, and also to his point, like we'll still need robot repairmen. I think we also will need repair people, and we still will need. I don't think that the traditional techniques are going away. Like I see these as very complementary. Like the kind of self-reported data you get when you actually engage with consumers versus what you can make use of sort of observed behavior, the digital trails that people are leaving behind. They can tell a very different story and answer different parts of the same question. I think the donut story you're thinking about is that I can predict that you want a donut, but I don't know what flavor unless I actually go talk to you about it.
Right.
So there's different parts of the question that you can get at with different points of view. I mean, I do think though, like this is if we're looking big picture in the future, this is a change that's happening for sure, right? Like we all know people are leaving more data behind them wherever they go. So the data is there, and really important, the tools are there too. So like the barriers to entry for actually doing machine learning, like computational resources are cheap and readily available with cloud resources. I don't know if non-practitioners might not be as aware of the fact that the algorithms themselves are like sort of on the shelf for use from people with like a lot less expertise. So there's a lot on the technical side, there's way less barriers to entries than there were, and all the data is sitting there. So I definitely think we're going to see a natural progression where we're going to see more researchers making use of those techniques and all of that data that's around to build something that naturally complements the traditional techniques that we've seen for a long time.
Yeah. Connie, I want to segue over to you to get your perspective. I know you've been in the industry for over 15 years and you've got a really great grasp of the global insight scene. Can you talk a little bit about how AI and machine learning have impacted your research approach from the client side?
Yes, from my experience, I think AI or machine learning actually has been existing for quite a while, right? It just lasts probably 4 or 5 years. It becomes a much bigger buzzword with a lot of things that's happening and more advanced technology. Even thinking of basic stuff, like when we talk about sampling, right now, real-time optimization on sampling, we're talking about manual coding, to natural language process, clustering or tagging, even programmed data processing to automated data table. I don't want to say much more because I know Melinda certainly is an expert on in this field. But that's all part of machine learning in the past, using algorithms to make us to do things more efficient and become smarter. What I see, I do echo, both of their points is I think machine learning or natural language processing, which we use quite a bit, right? Certainly we want to eventually go to this predicting phase. That's the desired stage. I feel a lot of them right now is still complementary to traditional marketing. Part of the reason is it makes us smarter and more efficient, but you still need that human power and human intelligence to inform how machine does things. That's my probably narrow perspective. Melinda, I know you have this profound expertise in machines or physics, things like that. A quick example, even a recent case we actually experimented last year with a startup company in Bay Area, right? They have this, we have to start from primary research with our target audience, which is very hard to reach, very hard to access. We're talking about C-suite in U.S. major, Fortune 1000 companies. So from the initial conversation, we actually use the natural language processing to cluster themes. This is relatively new to me. The reason for that is I think part of the beauty is it also removes some of human bias once you use machine to, to look at, how things are clustered based on their reactions and response, and also looking at sentiment value, right, based on the phrases they use. Of course, hopefully in the future, one of the evolution is voice-activated machine learning, because right now I think the technology is still lagging. So certainly it's evolving. And we actually use that to inform the second phase of the research, which is, using social media, the news and media coverage to look at where we are based on the themes we discovered and what's the competitive landscape and how we compare to a few, I would say, competitors we've never thought, because like the big players in the tech space. And the point here is, had we not done that primary research stage, we would probably have to rely on our assumption in terms of what are the key themes are. But with that primary research that informs us what are the key themes, then when we go out to this thousands and thousands news articles or storage coverage on social and also digital media, we are more, we're smarter and we have the right direction to look at how things are different, how things are shaping out. Certainly, the second phase, I would say, it's probably impossible to do it at a human being level. You're talking about, overall it's 10,000 articles, how you look at the themes and by companies and things like that. So the natural language processing, this new startup, is able to help us do it very efficiently and to the point. So it definitely helps tremendously. So the point I'm saying is it's really complementary, but at the same time, and also I see the machine learning can only do, at least at this point in time, can only do so much to so much. And then after that, once we got initial output, looking at the sentiment, all these clusters and themes and things like that, we still have to look at the human eyes, looking at how we differ from the big players or much stronger players in terms of the text, the phrases we use, the language, the positioning, because that's the human power. Machine is not able, at least at this point in time, to discern yet, even though they're able to show in a very visual way how we're lagging. But when we go down to individual articles and the story coverage, we are able to identify what differentiates those companies. So the point here is, I think definitely machine learning has come to a long way, and also there's definitely a lot, still a lot to evolve in the future. But right now, I do see it's a complementary to we call traditional research, but certainly make us much smarter and efficient and much more effective.
Yeah. Melinda, Frank, anything you want to add here?
No, I think, yeah, no, I think I agree with Connie. And I think a lot of the value we're seeing of AI is more in the augmentation of things more than taking over. So when you mention Connie, it's just about the inputs. It's there's people involved here. It's what you put into it. Absolutely agree. AI is not something that's going to come in and do all our work for us, but it has its uses when it's augmenting what we're doing, not being like HAL or something. It doesn't work like that yet.
Yeah, I love that view of it's just a tool. Like, think of it as another tool.
What's interesting is, I know AI is like artificial intelligence. I always like to use that and convert it into augmented intelligence, right? Because it helps us to become smarter and do things faster and better. Because some of the things just by human power, we definitely have a lot more limitation, but it really it augment what we do in the current world. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to segue and talk a little bit about AI and bias, because I know that that's been sort of a hot topic, not just in the general tech space, but in the research world. I know Jessica, who's Wire's marketing manager, she and I penned an article that was considered quite controversial that we just had published in Research World maybe a month or so ago, about how conscious and unconscious biases are basically built many times into these solutions because the folks creating them are primarily white males. And so there's been training data, algorithms, design choices that shape AI systems that both reflect and are sort of amplifying these kind of built-in cultural prejudices and inequalities. I know there was one article that I read where there was, facial recognition software that was built that didn't recognize differences between Asian American faces. There have been, associations like, for natural language techniques where they're associating women with receptionists. So I'm going to start off with Melinda, but Melinda, because I know you work with this data all the time and you're really entrenched in this world, have you seen the impact of those unintentional sort of, and I would hope that they're usually unconscious biases, affecting the validity of your research, due to the AI implementations? And, what are some ways that you're ensuring that, you're using processes and technologies that don't reflect that?
Yeah, and I think that's something, it's something really important to be aware of, because AI's job really is to generalize, right? And if you think of when we have problems just in the human world with bias and stereotypes, it comes from generalizations, because humans are great at pattern recognition and generalization, which is sometimes useful, but then can have these detrimental effects, right? And that's really, that pattern recognition and generalization is literally exactly what we're asking the computer to do when we're doing AI. So that means that from a best practices point of view, we have to be super aware of what we're asking it to learn? Like what's the goal task we're giving the AI? What are we feeding it? What data are we feeding it? And I think, Kristen, a lot of the examples that you're giving come from especially that stage of it. If you feed it data that contains certain biases, that's what it's going to find. And then I think it's also really important to keep in mind how it's applied. So there's cases where, you know, maybe your algorithm will find a certain association, and then it's up to a human to like take the output of this and use it. So a human needs to be aware of cases where it might be finding a generalization that shouldn't actually be applied in the real world, because that's not, you know, what you actually wanted to find. And I think, I mean, there's sort of a flip side of it too, right? That you can, there's a lot of cases where using AI allows you to be less reliant on stereotypes. So if you're trying to understand makeup users, you don't have to, you're not restricted to like go looking for makeup users and your own biases lead you towards women and you're only talking to women. If you're using AI to understand makeup users, you can just look at everyone who's expressed interest in makeup, regardless of how they identify their gender. So there's places where that can free you, but it's definitely researchers need to be aware of what data they're taking in, and especially how they're applying what they get out in the end.
Frank, is this a concern for you or for Dig when you're using these tools and you're making recommendations to clients? Is it something that you guys are cognizant of, or?
It is something that we're cognizant of. I mean, you know, for better or worse, in market research, the stakes are a little bit lower for us, quite frankly, we're dealing with consumer products and things like that, right? So if I was going to introduce a bias, it would probably be to my, favorite flavor of ice cream. That would be my recommendation. But, we are cognizant of that, and there's different ways that, there's different techniques that we use depending on the situation. So, like Melinda said, it's all about the data that goes into the model in the first place. Humans start and end this process every time. It's a tool that we use. What kind of problem are you looking at? Whose worldview do you really need? There are tools out there that we'll use depending on the problem. Like Amazon has a tool called Mechanical Turk, where you can take some data, images that you need coded. And one of the cool things about that is, you can say, I want it to go out to a number of different people, and I want them all to code it. And then you can see how that nets out. So it's kind of like a voting process now, where you can say, is everyone agreeing on what this is, what the category it goes into? Is there some disagreement? Do we need to look at it again? And so that's kind of a way to hedge your bets to a little bit and make sure that there's a little bit more certainty in what you're coding out, and make it a bit of a voting process. And so that puts a little bit more objectivity into what you're doing.
Yeah. So there was a, sorry, go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, someone in the chat just pointed out Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Mass Destruction, which has a lot to say on this topic, and especially the point that I think it makes well, which is important and like relevant to also what Frank's saying. What are the stakes in the decisions you make? And I'm talking about how are your results applied. She talks about it's important to consider once your model comes up with a recommendation, then what's the human action you take? So if you're looking for people who are at high risk for drug addiction, for instance, and that model may have biases in it, but it's very different if you take that and go apply some punitive action versus you take that and you go apply some some treatment availability of treatment. There's a word I'm missing, but you get what I'm saying. Like, if you the same action, it's not just what you could have, what the data, what kind of data the bias brings, and what data bias the model finds. It's really important to consider how that's being used in the real world also.
Yeah. So there was a study that came out of New York University. I'm just going to read a quote from it, where it says, a majority of AI studies assume gender is binary and commonly assign people as male or female based on physical appearance or stereotypical assumptions, erasing all other forms of gender identity. Which is kind of interesting, because in market research, I think it's only recently that we've offered another option as part of the gender question when we ask. So I guess the question is, if we're using AI or behavioral data and people are being classified one way or the other, you know, how are we addressing that as an industry, but also, you know, if we're combining that with primary research data and there is an other option, how does that impact, I guess, the combining of those two data sets?
Okay, so I can't speak for everyone in the industry. You know, I don't think that this is really an issue that we're, you know, dealing with that well right now. And it's a shame since we're in the business of demographics and representation. We actually recently ran a study on LGBTQ plus issues at Dig, and it's going to be released on our blog shortly. But one of the top line results from that was about a third of Gen Zs are identifying as members of the LGBTQ plus community right now. And, you know, what we took from this is, as an industry, you know, like you said, Kristen, we can't continue to just add other to the gender list and think that we're, you know, capturing that diversity, right? But that's not working anymore. These are not people who identify as other or as outside of a, you know, a binary gender system, and we're still asking them to, right? So we're not capturing what we need to be capturing. And you know,
a third is a big number. A third is a big number just to plunk into an other bucket.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and you know, and what we're saying is there's two options, or there's something else, and you're something else. But that's not how we should be thinking about it anymore, and that's not the paradigm anymore. So you know, I think we're kind of getting on the right track, but it's going to be important for our growth as an industry to incorporate, you know, real representation into how we're doing our research. And it's not just for the benefit of respondents; it's for our benefit too. Like, our research needs to have this. Our research needs to include this, if it's going to be representative of the population. And so, you know, I think we have the same problems in AI, and I can get all into that, but just in research, we're seeing that, you know, we're not totally cutting it right now.
Right, yeah. And I guess that, you know, that was one of my questions is, if you are integrating machine learning, you know, and AI at Dig, you know, sort of what's the feedback process around ensuring that you are avoiding bias, and is it just something you have to be cognizant of on a day-to-day basis?
So it is something we have to be cognizant of, and you know, we will use Mechanical Turk, or we will, you know, depending on the size of the problem or who needs to code it, you know, start thinking about who should be doing that and who should be, you know, deciding what goes into this model. And you know, the example I would give is, you know, AI is pretty dumb, okay? AI does what we tell it to do, and it repeats things that we tell it to do, and it recognizes patterns. And Melinda will get mad at me because this is a very simplified explanation, but like, you know, it can basically, if you want an AI to recognize cats, show it 1,000 pictures of what you say are cats, and it will recognize that as cats in the future. But if you're trying to find something, you know, that's not as clear cut, that's not cat, no cat, that we often find in the nuances of human data, like gender, race, sexuality, we can't expect a single person or a single group with a single set of life experiences to necessarily be able to capture that in a wholesome way and say, you know, and this is how, you know, Google's gotten in trouble for this, right? In their photos, they had some big, you know, publicity a couple of years ago, and the media was calling their models racist, and the people who trained them racist. And, you know, the fact is, the model wasn't racist because it's not capable of that. The people, I don't know them personally, but I'm going to assume that they probably were not racist on purpose. But they did have a particular set of life experiences and a particular set of training data that manifested itself as a bias in their model, and people got rightfully offended. And, you know, we can all take a lesson from that when we're training AI, when we're working on training data. Are we dealing with cat versus no cat, where it's pretty clear cut and, you know, and low stakes? I can decide what the cat is. Or are we dealing with something a little bit more complex, or some particular facet of human nature that's a little bit more complex? And maybe we need to, you know, start there and think about how we're creating that data. You know, I won't claim to have the solution to AI bias here for all of us today. That's a big issue. But, you know, framing the issue like that and just thinking about, you know, am I the right person to make this call and train a machine to keep making the calls that I made? That's certainly a good start, and a way that we can, you know, move our technology and our research towards a more, you know, inclusive view of the world and the people in it.
Yeah, Elizabeth Merrick at Nest gave this really great presentation. It was a couple of years ago at a conference that I saw, where she was kind of explaining the difference between machine learning and AI. And she was giving some examples, and one of them was a cat example, like, is this a cat, or is this a cat, or is this a cat? And like, as the image changed, like if the cat was wearing a hat, it would not recognize it as a cat anymore. And so it was, I'm not doing her presentation justice because it was actually really funny, but it was interesting to see where the machine kind of broke down and was like, I don't know what that is anymore, because now you've dressed it up as something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here for a second.
Yeah.
You're really talking about some profound, like talking about machine learning, train the machine to do things, even from our personal experience, just with natural language processing. That also, the bias also could exist depending on the inputs, right? That's all the human knowledge and, brain power. Very simple example, when we're trying to identify the Abbott, how Abbott is different from other companies, the startup company didn't know, using Abbott as one of the bureaus or filters. But we have to inform them, say, you have to remove anything related to Governor Abbott. Governor, because I think Texas governor is Mr. Abbott. So there are some of the basic fundamental knowledge. You have to not say train the machine, but inform the input or search criteria or this natural language tagging system. The same thing when we did a social listening. It was on the social forum, and the company did a really nice job. But they're missing one of the components because it's not a common language people would use. It's based on our synthesized from a different research. Then we're saying, oh, the partnership is missing here. Then when they look at the linkage, because the machine doesn't think about partnership, right? It wasn't part of the inputs. Then they say, wow, they were talking about the little startup university. That's all sort of like, they think that's more innovative, things like that. So I feel with the AI, I echo Frank's point, is a lot of those is, do we have that knowledge power? Because humans also have a lot of bias. And also really talks about upscaling opportunity for market researchers. Really understand, what AI encompasses, how AI has done their job, and so we can put right inputs to train the machine or to do the job correctly.
Yeah, good points. Good points. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to segue to see if we've got any questions. As I mentioned before, if you do have a question for the panelists, if you can post them into the chat box. There's a Q&A box. If you can put them there, that would be super helpful. We've got one question from my pal Tim Lynch. Hi, Tim. Is the short-term concern bias in the AI or bias in the researchers? I don't know. Who wants to take that?
I think my example I just shared is really a good example talking about the bias of our inputs, right? About our human intelligence, how much we know, how much we don't know. And of course, based on the part of the beauty I feel is, the data sources are there anyway. So once you find something out or that doesn't make sense, you can always go back. And that's what I'm talking about, iterative process, right? With AI or machine learning, I think it's really hard. We have to set a right expectation to expect everything is done right the first time.
Yeah. Frank, Melinda, anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the bias is always in the researcher. I don't think that AI is capable on its own of bias. It's a machine, and it's gonna do what we tell it to do. And in AI, the instructions are a little bit more complicated, and the generalization that it does is a little bit more complicated. But it only knows what we tell it, right? So it's code. It's zeros and ones. Well, usually. And I don't think it's capable of bias on its own, nor do we have any like cognizant AI that I know of currently that has developed its own personality.
And to add to what Frank said, I think we should even assume that the AI will find whatever bias we make available for it to find, and so we should think of it from that perspective.
Yeah. So Melinda, we've got another question that just popped up that I think would be great if you could sort of kick off the answer to. Hi, Janet. Janet Standen is asking, what is the #1 most valuable or powerful use of AI versus human interpretation?
So, hi, Janet. I wonder if Janet might be going bigger than I'm going to go, but I'm going to reach to a world where I can actually speak, which is in this research domain. And because I think that where, I mean, the question is sort of like, what can you get with AI that you can't get from a human? And like, where is that the most valuable? Like, where do you get the most valuable incremental improvement? And I think that obviously the value is actually the flip side of what we were just talking about. It's super good at finding all the patterns. So it's going to find patterns that humans may not have found, which is kind of an answer saying it's even better at doing the thing that we're already doing, or it can do the same thing that we humans can do, but it can do it at better scale. I think something that actually changes once you have that scale available is when you're trying to do something, especially that you just can't do at small scale. Like if you're doing this, Frank referenced segmentation. If you're doing segmentation and you're trying to really find a high value group of people that really would be in your blind spot and really is in some way niche, or there's just not very many of them, you inherently need a giant sample size of people in order to do that. And if the characteristic that you're looking for is maybe one that you didn't know that you were looking for, you need a large number of variables for each of those high number of people that you've sampled. So in order to possibly have any hopes to do that, first you need a different way of collecting data than the standard methods where you ask, get self-reported data. You need some large scale observed data source where you can collect it for as many people as possible. And then in order to actually process something that has, hundreds of thousands or millions of people with tens of millions of variables each, you need AI in order to process it. So for a task like finding an audience that you didn't know about and never would have thought to ask for in a segmentation, I think that's where you really need something like that.
Frank, Connie, any thoughts on that question? What's the one most valuable or powerful use of AI versus human interpretation?
I do echo Melinda's point. I mean, from our practical use case point of view, I think AI allow us to sift through thousands and thousands of information, whether it's on social, digital platform, and really provide some patterns and looking at the patterns and themes. So, I think that's really hard to go through with human intelligence or human eyes. So it really make us to be very efficient and also comb through extremely large amount of data in a very, very informative ways.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've always seen the main value of most parts of AI is just the feasibility of the problem size. AI can recognize things that we can't, just because our brains aren't big enough. You know what I mean? If our brains can process more and more information, then we would be able to do it too. The main difference between running a big complicated neural net and running a logistic regression is the size of the problem and the compute power that you have and the number of variables that you're able to process. So if you had 5 features and you were trying to do a segmentation, you could probably just look at it and say, okay, well, I can just intuitively, my brain has enough compute to figure that out. But when you have 1,000 variables and thousands and thousands of people, that's when AI becomes and machine learning becomes your friend and can process that information for you that you're just a little limited by, because you can't just up the EC2 instance to have more power.
Yeah, so Frank, Janet made another comment here, which would be great for you to give your opinion on, since you did talk about segmentation earlier in the webinar. But she said it makes me wonder if all the segmentation studies done over the last 10 to 15 years had any real validity. ARG, the basis of so many marketing strategies in the past.
I can jump in to make a couple comments, because I came back from Cannes Lions advertising festival. A couple of very provoking thoughts. I think the time has evolved, Janet. In the past probably 20 years ago, we're talking about mass marketing, right? So the segmentation, talking about you survey 1,000 consumers, trying to find the target audience that fits your product and fulfill their unmet needs is sort of the way to go. But nowadays, giving so much information available, the younger generation looks for personalized offering, things like that. That kind of mass targeting may not be as relevant as 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that also demand us in terms of how we can better, come up with research approach to really understand the market dynamics, the current consumers, versus doing the so-called, the traditional market segmentation. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for legal purposes, no, all of the past 10 or 15 years were completely valid. But,
of course it was valid.
Liability out of the way. I think it got better, and everything, it got better, and it's better now because we have more compute, we have better models, we have more people working in all kinds of different industries to open source stuff that we can just use out of the box. Like there's just a lot happening that made it better. If you bought a car 20 years ago, it's not going to be as fuel efficient as today's cars, but that doesn't mean that your Honda from 1999 was a bad car. It was the best at the time. And so, things will always evolve and always get better. And I think that the segmentation you did 10 years ago was perfectly valid. Probably not anymore. You're probably aged out of that one. So if you're still using it, then yeah, maybe update it now. We have better methods. But yeah, things evolve. Things get better. It's technology, right?
Yeah. Melinda, anything you want to add before we move on to the last question?
I think they covered it.
Yeah. Okay. So just one last question. We're kind of out of time for Q&A. I'll be talking about how you can ask additional questions of the panelists post-webinar, but I always like to wrap up webinars with like one, sort of action or, pro tip that people can walk away from. And I think a common frustration with a lot of folks is that there's so much new technology and so many new companies coming onto the scene in the industry, and particularly with so much chat around AI, it can be really hard to follow the thread and know like what to pay attention to and what to ignore. So, and I'm gonna start with you, Connie. But if you can just give me like 30 seconds on how you stay up to date on the latest tech and trends and what resources you use to do that. That you feel are like really reliable and don't provide a lot of distraction.
Yeah, I think AI machine learning is a very valuable tool. What I see, and also it's evolving very quickly. What I see right now is even from the project users, they're still expensive. That's one of the barriers. I wish we could use more, but not every single project, right? So it's still expensive. Hopefully, as technology evolves, things becomes more affordable, so we can really leverage AI or machine learning in a more mass scale. But at the same time, my point here is, I don't think AI is going to replace human intelligence, but it does challenge us in terms of how we should consider upskill ourselves and really using AI as a very valuable tool to make us more smarter and more intelligent and, discover insights more efficiently and effectively.
Thanks. Frank?
Yeah, I think for most of the chatter about AI is not happening in market research. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of happening outside of market research, and we kind of are trailing in some ways. So, you know what I mean? If you're, technically minded, looking towards like what the open source community is doing, what's coming out, like occasionally Google or Facebook or somebody open sources something that makes it possible for us to do something and to us to borrow techniques and leverage something that wasn't developed for that specific purpose. So if you type like market research AI, you're probably not going to get the great results and see what's coming. But also be on the lookout for what AI is and what it's not. I mean, this year especially, we're seeing everybody calls everything AI. Every single product that I've seen, a software product, is, oh, we have AI. And then you're like, what does that mean? And they're like, don't worry about it. It's in the background. It's all AI. It's amazing. It's going to be great. But very few people can tell you what that means and how they're using AI. And so I think just questioning them, like, what does that mean? What are you doing is important. And maybe Connie, they don't have any AI and you could get a discount and then it wouldn't be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had this conversation with someone yesterday about blockchain and, how many times I've seen a presentation where they're talking about how they use blockchain and I'm like, you actually don't need blockchain to do that. But they've included it. It sounds super
blockchain
sexy.
is a very slow database. That's mostly what it is.
Melinda, how about you? Any, good resources, tips or tricks for resources or publications you read or things you watch?
I like Frank's point of paying attention to the open source communities. That's always a good one to see kind of what's hot off the presses. I also like company tech blogs. So just think of all your favorite tech companies and find most of them have like a tech blog somewhere. So I like to follow those, and that's where you see like how people are sort of applying. Like I kind of referenced how there's lots of techniques that are on the shelf and ready to be used, and that's where you can see examples of how people are starting to use those techniques in different domains. And then I said before, all these cool high-tech solutions are a complement to the old traditional solutions, and you still have to go talk to people. And I give that answer here too. You just have to go talk to people. Like you have to have your network of people who are working on the same type of things and just see what they're hearing and what they've been working on lately.
Yeah, great feedback. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm gonna wrap up and just have a few little housekeeping items to go through. First, I just wanna thank everyone, all of our panelists today, Connie, Frank, Melinda. Thanks so much for joining the webinar today and sharing your wisdom and expertise. If anyone listening wants to hear a repeat, as I mentioned, we are recording the webinar. It'll be up on our website, and we'll also be sending that link out to everyone who registered for today's discussion. If anyone has any additional questions for the group, we'll be continuing the conversation on Twitter. You can just post your questions on Twitter, and our fabulous marketing manager, Jessica, will make sure that our panelists have access to them and we get answers over to you. I also want to give another thank you to our webinar sponsors, to Research for Good, again, for sponsoring this entire series, and again, to Focus Vision for letting us use their webinar platform. We really appreciate the support. And then lastly, I want to just give a final pitch of our Global Scholarship Fund. And if you're not familiar with this fund, it's something we've been running now for 4 years in collaboration with the SMR Foundation. And it's funding a female student entering into an educational program in a market research related field of study. And it's only for women in conflict or economically challenged markets. And this year we're funding a student in Sri Lanka. And we've had just a total flood of donations come in after last month's session, and we're actually only $1,500 away from being able to fund this woman's education for an entire year. So, your donations are super appreciated. There's a link up on the screen right now if you're able to donate anything. Even we had somebody donate their weekly coffee money to it. Every little bit helps. If you donate $1, even $5, we'd be super appreciative. And again, we do this in collaboration with SMR Foundation and with a matching grant from Unilever. So many, many thanks to Unilever. Every dollar that you donate is matched by Unilever. So appreciate that. As I mentioned before, we've got all of our episodes from our 2019 webinar series up on the Wire webinar page. So make sure to check there, as well as your inbox tomorrow for this recording. And I'm just going to wrap up and say thanks so much to everyone for your support, and thank everyone for attending today. And many, many thanks again to our great panelists, to Frank, Melinda, and Connie. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.